Hey folks, welcome to PHL308 Language and World. This is going to be your set of introductory lectures. They will always be available on YouTube, and I will post the links on D2L. YouTube limits me to 15 minutes, so probably each week's set of lectures will be broken down into 10 to 15 minute chunks. I'll try to make those chunks make sense as well as I can. I hope that you will find this convenient, actually, because it means that you can listen at 10 or 15 minute intervals. So I'm hoping that that will fit into your schedule really well. It also makes the download faster if you would like to download the lectures and use them again. I do have my YouTube set to live stream, so that should work. I hope that that works, but you should be able to download the little chunks as well. Okay, so on to the beginning. Yeah. So this is me. I'm Dr. Waller. I will be teaching this class. You can call me Sarah. I love philosophy of language. I wrote my dissertation on it. I was incredibly impassioned for years about semantics and still am, but for a variety of bizarre reasons, I've never had the opportunity to teach this class. So I'm putting it together for you all fresh and new. What that means is that we can follow questions that you're interested in as well. I do not have 100% of the readings set up for the semester, so I'm hoping in April we can do things that you really think are fun and that you enjoy. I love philosophy of language. I think it's the most important stuff in the entire world, but many people think philosophy of language is absolutely the worst stuff in the world, except for maybe philosophy of mathematics or some sort of higher levels of theoretical calculus. Philosophy of language can come across as incredibly dry, disconnected, ivory tower BS, too much technical vocabulary, too much irritating language, making distinctions that don't matter, abstract, irritating. You will need to review your logic for this. I will help you do that next week. We will go over logic and language. We are criticized for being able to talk to only 12 other people who specialize in this discipline. It seems very detached. It seems very unhelpful. My friends in ethics in this way have it very easy, even though often people think that ethics is maybe not intellectual or super easy. At least ethics helps people make decisions in the real world. Thinking about ethics changes policy and law and practice. And so the main critique of philosophy of language and how people critique philosophy as a whole is that it's completely irrelevant to the real world. I think that this critique is consummately false, and I'm going to first present an argument as to why this critique is completely freaking wrong. So let's start with that connection to the real world thing, that relevance thing. And let's start with an easy connection between language and the world. The Oxford English Dictionary 2016 word of the year is post-truth. So they are making the claim that we live in a world where culturally we care more about feelings and interpretations, and truth either doesn't exist at all or is fundamentally and profoundly relevant to the person making the truth claim or the person doing the thinking or observing. Words have other weird connections to the world. Just as an aside, the 2015 word of the year was the laughy cry emoji. I think I get a big kick out of that. But back to 2016, the word of the year for Merriam-Webster was surreal. So if you think about the comments that these dictionary makers are making about the world, I think you'll get a kick out of it. We live in a surreal post-truth world. And what that means is that we live in a world of climate change deniers, people who are uninterested in or who do not believe in science or believe that science is so highly politicized and driven by funding and interests, that there is no reality being produced by it. Perhaps there's no reality at all. We see this in the proliferation of fake news. We see this in questions about fact and what is real. The whole Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton thing, I think, illustrates that very well. And we will talk about that some more. It's a great example. It is very common for people coming in to college in general to think that truth is only a matter of interpretation, or it's relative to each individual, or it's fully dependent upon context, cultural context, or personal context, and how the facts are framed. So basically, we've collapsed into a culture of substantive ontological relativism. And if this is the case, right, if people do not believe that there is a shared reality, or that truth is a matter of opinion, or that there's my truth and your truth and someone else's truth, how are we going to talk to each other? In fact, how does language work at all, right? I mean, that seems incredibly bizarre. How does language work at all if we don't share any sort of reality, right? If we don't share cars and traffic laws, how do we talk to each other? How does language work at all? How can we talk to each other? So my specific research interests, in case this also catches your fancy, is about how to communicate with other species on the planet, like wolves and cats. So you have these social creatures who make a lot of different vocalizations, and the noises that they make do seem to have some sort of communicative value. But if human beings each have their own profoundly and fundamentally different realities, my goodness, how could I possibly share any interests or desires or beliefs or thoughts with my cat? How can wolves communicate with each other? How can human beings communicate with wolves? How do you talk to your dog, right? Wolves are just wild dogs. So do other species have language? I'm very interested in that. I'm very interested in the question of, if we meet extraterrestrials, how might we communicate? The picture here in the center is the picture from The Arrival, which is a great film if you haven't seen it. And it raises these questions about philosophy and language and reality, and how different minds conceive of and understand reality. It will probably become extra credit for this class later in this class. So that's my abstract research. But personally, I also wonder how we might communicate with this guy. You can go ahead and click on this link. Not that he wants to communicate with me, or that he thinks he can communicate with me, but it seems like people who have profoundly and fundamentally different opinions about what reality is do need to talk to each other sometimes, because we need to make decisions about how we're going to live together, about what the laws are, about how we treat one another, right? So it seems like we need to communicate with each other. Further, it seems like we do communicate with each other, right? I mean, here you are listening to my lecture, signed up for this class. We've emailed back and forth. We're about to have discussions on discussion boards. So it seems like language actually does convey meaning, and it does convey a shared reality. And yet, how can we be sure? What are the methods that we use for figuring out whether or not we're talking to each other, or whether we're misunderstanding each other? What do we do? These are the topics that are going to govern this class and make this class exciting. See this side of the slide. All semester long, these are our major questions. One way to unpack it is to just say, look, we're going to try to figure out how language works, and we're going to recognize that all of our claims, I don't care if they're scientific or philosophical or political or mathematical or artistic, they're all made in language. Whenever you give evidence for a view, you use language. Your beliefs take linguistic form. When you decide to do something, when you decide to act, that decision can be put in linguistic form. So we really need to understand how language works because it influences our thoughts, our actions, our morality. And in fact, language could shape our notions of reality. What if language distorts how we understand reality? What if we are trapped in English, but reality actually maps better onto Japanese or Swahili, or vice versa? Or what if no language really represents reality very well? Likewise, language could create reality, right? When we debate political principles and concepts, we are shaping democracy. In fact, the notion of democracy is explained in words and sentences first. When we explain the importance of a work of art, we use words and sentences for that. So there's a reciprocal relationship where language can change our notions of reality, but also language could distort our notions of reality, and language can create reality. When we vote, we do create reality, and then that reality changes. So I have many, many more examples of this, and we will talk about it all semester and also later in this lecture. But I'd like to cut us off at about the 11-minute mark now, and then we'll move on to Unit 2. So I'll just scroll quickly through the rest of this, and then you can start Unit 2.